What do you want to be when you grow up? I think this is a question that we all receive probably quite a few times in our childhood. And as we get ready to navigate the space of going to college, we're really trying to find out what we want to be so that we can find the school that's the best fit for us. And the same is true for scholarships. We're all trying to find the best fit so that we can increase our chances of winning scholarships and getting into the schools that we want. So here today on the Scholar Budget podcast, where we help students to earn a debt-free degree, our guest is going to talk to us about Georgia Tech's awesome and amazing scholarship programs. And if you plan on going to Georgia Tech, you definitely want to plug into this episode. But our guest is also sharing some nuggets that can apply to any college or university that you attend. So who is our guest? Well, Chaffee Viets directs the Office of Scholar Programs at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, which houses the Stamps President Scholars Program and the Tech Promise Scholars Programs. For more than 25 years, he's served as an administrator of university scholar programs that provide full or near full rides, as well as student and community development opportunities. So go ahead and grab your favorite notepad, pen or pencil, a snack or two. Take notes and take action. You're listening to the Scholar Budget podcast, where we teach you how to earn a debt-free degree, grow your money, and claim every opportunity with your name on it. I'm your host, Raquel Bartoli. Let's jump right in. All right, Chaffee, we are so excited you're on the show. How are you feeling today?
Feeling great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, we try our best to get as much information to our listeners so that they can make the best decisions for their scholars. And even as parents, trying to navigate all of the information out there. So we always like to have people that are like boots on the ground working in the schools so they can give their perspective on scholarships and programs. So Chaffee, can you start by telling us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. And thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it, Rocky. I direct the Office of Scholar Programs at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've been in this industry for about 26 years at 4 different universities. I've had the honor of serving as the president of the Undergraduate Scholar Programs Administrators Association.
Nice.
Yep, that's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful, right?
And I'm also on the board currently of the NSPA, which is the National Scholarship Providers Association. One aspect of my work I wanted to clarify up front is that when I use the word program, what I mean is specifically a community of scholars with whom we continue to work after they get here. So it's not just about giving them the financial award, but also investing in them in terms of their professional development, retreats, events, other enriching experience, so that hopefully they pay forward that return on the investment to improve the world.
Yeah, and I thank you for pointing that out because there is a difference between a scholarship that a scholar can receive, and it's like, here's the money, do what you got to do, and then a program which really provides those additional services to help the student really succeed and get to that finish line. So thank you for clarifying that. And so you've been working in the scholarship space for quite some time, which is exciting for me because I'm all about scholarships. And so can you talk to us about the scholarship programs that you oversee specifically at Georgia Tech?
Sure. So I came here in 2011 to take over the Stamps President Scholars Program, and that's our full ride merit scholarship program, targets the top 50 students who come into Georgia Tech from a merit perspective. And been around since about 1981, but I would say that the Stamps program is actually part of a network. There's 40 of these programs at other schools, all funded by the Stamps family out of Miami, Florida. I also oversee a second merit scholarship program called the Gold Scholarship Program. Same type of focus, just less lucrative, doesn't have as much money involved in it. Recently have really been excited because I now oversee our Tech Promise Scholars Program. And if you don't know what a promise program is, and some of your listeners may not, these were developed really to try to help students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Okay.
And so while they merit getting into Georgia Tech, which is more and more challenging these days,
Right.
they do come from circumstances where they're a little more financially vulnerable. And so a promise program gives them a full ride scholarship to be here. And then, in
Nice.
addition to that, now we're providing the community, the program side of it. And there are these promise programs at a lot of other schools too, but up until recently, the past year or four, depending on how we look at COVID,
Right, right, because
it
that
hasn't had
matters.
a program aspect here. So, yeah.
Right. Beautiful. And so when is the Promise program, are all the programs from different universities, are they all under like kind of that same Promise program, or is it just the name that most colleges give to it because it encompasses everything that it does?
It's the latter, actually. So
Okay.
there's a similar scholarship at the UNC Chapel Hill, and it's called the Carolina Covenant. So Covenant, Promise, right? Those are the
Mm,
ideas. I think most of them are called Promise programs, but they do go
okay.
by different terms at different universities.
Beautiful. And so, with over 24 years of experience in university scholar programs, what significant changes or trends have you observed in the field of scholarships from your point of view?
I'd probably divide it into pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Okay.
So yeah, I was fortunate to get a merit scholarship when it was the middle of the 90s, and yes, I've just revealed my age. Uh, and uh, the criteria was a little different. Traditionally, programs back then looked at leadership and academics, and
Mm-hmm.
service wasn't a big deal, at least not in my experience.
Right.
And in the program I was in, and in several others, within 5 to 10 years, service was a component of all of those programs. And so that's something
Mm.
I've seen that these days, if you haven't done service, you're actually probably not going to be in a good position to win one of these awards.
Wow.
One of the other ones, it may seem obvious, but the competitiveness has dramatically changed. And, but I think what I mean specifically is that, I look at what it took for me to get a scholarship, and I look at what it takes for the students I'm working with now, and I'm like, I would never have gotten one of these.
It's a lot more challenging for
It
sure.
it is, and to be quite honest, I lament that a little bit because I wonder when do these kids have time to have a
Just
life?
be.
Yeah,
Right.
and I do
Absolutely.
think that's important that they should have that, but it is harder for them these days to have that. Post COVID, different scenario. I think that if we remember that during COVID was also the circumstances with George Floyd and the emergence really of Black Lives Matter. I think you put those two things together, and what we saw happen was a lot of people from under-resourced communities, from disadvantaged backgrounds, that were not being given opportunities in lots of areas.
Right.
And in higher education, I think we saw that too. And so
Yeah.
I've seen recently a lot more focus on extending scholarships that are focused on improving access.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really something that's going on at Georgia Tech, but it's
Love it.
certainly going on in the industry as well.
Beautiful. And I hear you when you say the competitiveness and all the things that need to be done, which is one of the reasons why I think I try to emphasize to parents, because oftentimes they'll say like, Rocky, when should we start the process? And the truth is middle school, as early as middle school, because I think it starts with a conversation of why your academics matter, why service is important, not just for the scholarships, but hopefully because, it'll humble us a little bit to be able to serve and do well in our community. And so those are all things I feel like parents and students can start in middle school. Then by the time you're in high school, you have a true story about how your service impacted the community versus being a junior or senior and doing like 10 hours with this nonprofit and 15 hours here and there. So would you say that starting sooner is better than waiting later?
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite audiences is to get a group of eighth and ninth graders. because you get a chance to actually help them see some of those things early on. I
Right.
do like talking to seniors, sure, but by that point, they're almost fully baked, right?
Yeah,
I
true,
mean, and
true.
so yeah, I totally agree with you.
Awesome. And so, what qualities and achievements do you look for in prospective scholars when recruiting for the Stamps President Scholars Program or any other program that you oversee?
Sure, absolutely. So we focus here on four pillars, is what we call them: scholarship, leadership, progress, and service.
Okay.
And you'll find that different universities and different programs use different criteria as well, but almost all of them, in my experience, have academics and leadership as part of them, right?
All
And
right.
increasingly service, as I mentioned. But those are the ones we use. And for us, it's looking at their application to Georgia Tech, and then eventually, if they do well there in an interview, and looking for the evidence of those four different criteria.
Okay.
It's the same that we use for our Gold Scholars program as well, which is merit based. The Tech Promise program is admissions does the hard work of determining that these students merit getting in here, which again, our selectivity's really gone up in the past decade. And so, but then beyond that, our financial aid office tries to make sure that they come from a background where this money is really going to help them and help us to give them opportunities that they haven't had before.
Awesome. And so, would you say that the competition continues to get even steeper and steeper each year? Is it leveling out? Like, what do you observe?
Yeah, it does get steeper and steeper every year. On some level, I've got some stories. On another, I've got numbers that show that. The numbers are pretty obvious.
Right.
The stories, I think, really come down to the fact that there are people who are trying to do things that you and I might have expected, grown adults in their 40s to be doing.
Right.
And, these kids are doing it at 16 or 17, but not all of them. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's an important part of what all scholarship professionals should be doing is making sure that we are looking broadly, right? Because
Hmm.
anyone can start a nonprofit or a business at 16 or 17 if they've got all the resources that they
Yeah.
need.
Very true.
How do we see merit in places where they don't have as much opportunity? We have to continue to make sure that we're not marginalizing those groups.
Right. So that everyone can receive as much help as possible on an equal and fair scale. And so, for those parents and students who are listening now, especially those students who have Georgia Tech on their hearts, right? And they're like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad
Sure.
I'm hearing this. What do you suggest students start doing now to position themselves to qualify for amazing scholarships and programs such as the ones that you have shared?
Yeah, great question. And like the eighth and ninth graders are my favorite audience, this is one of my favorite questions. So I think it's because at this stage, no matter where somebody's at, you really can help affect their destiny if they do this. If they start looking at who they are,
Mm-hmm.
two things: what do they like? What are they good at?
Okay.
List those out on a piece of paper. And then you start to see in it, even though it's words, you start to see sort of a self portrait.
Right.
This is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I'm good at. Then you start to look for the schools or the scholarships that are out there that match that self portrait, right?
Okay.
So it should come together like this. It
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be kind of like weird and off,
Right. Just
where
all over the place.
yeah, like they should match.
Right.
And by doing that, you are going to find that you are able to be more authentic in your applications. If you
Mm-hmm.
have an interview that's part of it, you're able to answer those questions because you're talking about you. You're talking about what you like and what you're good at. That is not a hard conversation to have.
Right.
Where I see people make the mistake is that when they start immediately by going, okay, I'm going to go after whatever I've seen on television or whatever I've seen in social media, whatever I've heard counselors and parents and friends, all of whom can be good people, by the way, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah. Absolutely.
telling you, oh, you should target for this school or you should target for that school. Well, yeah, but make sure that you match well with it. And
Mm-hmm.
so figuring out who you are first, creating that self portrait, it's got to be the first thing that you do. If you don't do that and you start by trying to mold yourself to something
Right.
that you aren't, you're not going to be authentic. And I will tell you, application readers and interviewers can see that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope that makes sense to our listeners to, yes, take advantage of the support that you have, but make sure things are in alignment as best as you can. Even with scholarships, as I'm telling students, like the goal is to find the scholarship that's the best fit for you because not every scholarship is a good fit, but you got to go through those requirements and see, what's worth your time and what's not. And so, on the flip side of that, what can parents start doing, in your opinion, to support their scholars to get ready for these opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is so often a family process. And even more today, I mean, back to your question about what's changed, families are a lot more involved, in my experience, these days
That's
than they
great.
have been. I think that parents have to give their students, their sons and daughters, they have to give them permission to tell them what they really want. And it may seem like, oh, well, I know that little Johnny or little Susie, they know they can tell me everything. Well, maybe they do and maybe they don't. And so saying, where do you really want to go? What do you really want to study? What's on your heart? What's important to you? I think that's an important conversation that a lot of parents don't have. I think the parents oftentimes start, or at least some of the time, start by saying, well, this is what I know is good for you. And
Right.
it's not to say that they're not right. Okay. It's just to say that when you start there, you set up your children for wanting to please you and not wanting to tell you if they have a different opinion or a different plan in front. Right.
I mean, even just do they want to go to college or not?
Right.
Because in our heads, we want what's best for them. And for some parents, it is that college route. And even as a parent myself, I'd love both of my kids to go to college, but I understand at the same token that if it's not a good fit for them now, because I'm all about season. So
Right.
I know that maybe in this season, it might not be a good fit for you, but at least have a plan. Like, okay, if you're not going to go to college, okay, then what vocational school, what certification, what are you going to do? And then sometimes with maturity and your network of people, it helps you to kind of shift your decision making. So thank you for sharing that with us. And so I have seen, unfortunately, a lot of students who lose the scholarships that they worked really hard to obtain. They did all the things, they started early, all of this good jazz. Um, and then they lose it, right? So, can you share some of the factors that you've seen that contribute? Because I think sometimes students think, like, oh, I got the scholarship and I'm done. But oftentimes with programs and those scholarships that are reoccurring, there's still this check and, they're checking in, et cetera. So, tell us what you've seen with those students who've lost their scholarship opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great question and something that I think that a lot of us in higher education and in scholarship programs are really trying to address more and more these days, especially with the mental health, issues that have come up as revealed by COVID, I think, and even
Right,
before then. Two things. Students either don't ask for help or they don't realize that there is help. And those are the two big things that I see become an issue. So, for example, if I've been identified as a merit scholar, I may think that I am letting people down if I admit that I need help in a class, or that I'm embarrassed, or have too much pride,
right,
or well, I've always gotten A's, so what does it mean that I don't have that now? And rather than face the problem, because a lot of these students haven't really experienced failure, the ones who are getting the kind of program scholarships that we're talking about,
right.
they don't know how to deal with it. And so they don't ask. The others, and I see this a lot of times with students, I'm first gen, by the way, just like you. Are you
Yeah.
first gen? Yes. Yeah, there you go. Right. And I didn't know there was certain helps available to me when I went to school, and I see that a lot with our students too. And so we really try to do a good job here of saying, first of all, we're not saying you're going to need help,
Right,
but if you are, absolutely vital that you ask for it.
right.
And to try to drive home the point, I ask the students, especially when I can see they're looking at me and they're like, oh, I'm not ever going to need help, is I'll go, okay, so in 10 years, right? When somebody asks you where you went to school, you're going to answer, right? If you're at Georgia Tech or you went to Georgia Tech, you're going to say, I went to Georgia Tech.
Right.
And then are they going to ask you if you got tutoring? And they like look at me and they laugh and they're like, no. I'm like, right.
Oh.
Nobody cares how you got the degree.
Hmm.
They care that you got the degree.
Right.
So it really doesn't matter if you go get help, and you got to get past any kind of embarrassment or pride or other issues, because getting that help is so significant. And when those things don't happen, that's part of what I think causes them to lose their awards.
And that's insight, because that's something that I wasn't, privy to. So knowing now, like, it's just that lack of raising your hand, which is something I do talk to students about: self-advocacy, and utilizing the resources that you're literally paying for. I mean, it's within your scholarship and
Right.
scholarships and payments. So take advantage of what you have. So I hope this is helpful for both parents and students hearing this, because we don't want you to put in all this amazing work, academically serving, being a leader, get this amazing program scholarship, and then lose it simply because you were struggling in academics or mental health and you didn't ask for the help. So thank you for shining some light on that. And can you discuss the differences between university-based scholarship programs and external scholarships, so that parents and students can understand, like, what's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So university scholar programs tend to be focused on what's important to that university,
Okay.
or in some cases to the donor who gave the money to the school. And the nice thing about them is that if you apply for a scholarship at that school and you get it, is that you are often going to be given lots of support during your time there. It's going to
Wonderful.
be academic support, leadership, service, and in the good programs, and I think most of them are, we have
Yeah.
professional organizations to try to share best practices, right? You get a, I don't want to say a tailored experience, but you get an experience that is designed to help you pay forward what you've been given, right?
Okay.
So I'm not concerned if a student wants to become a professor or they want to become a business person. I'm going to help them in both respects,
Hmm.
because I know that if they are successful at the undergraduate level and then they go on and they become one of those roles, and there's 100 other roles, right? Then they can make the world a better place in their particular area, right?
Very true.
And I think university programs are really good about that. Now, external scholarships oftentimes may have some similar criteria, but then what they don't have is the ability to help those students once they go to a school, because they're not connected to those schools. Now, that said, I will say one thing, and I go back to this earlier question you asked. The external scholarships sometimes don't have all the vast numbers of criteria that sometimes the programs do.
Right.
And so that makes it sometimes a little easier for somebody to find one, because there's a lot more of them than there are scholar programs, a lot more external scholarships.
Right.
The last thing I would say is and I've seen this especially in my role with the National Scholarship Providers Association, is that increasingly some of the external scholarship organizations are trying to make connections with local universities where they tend to send their students to,
Okay.
if such a relationship exists,
Exists. Right.
to find personnel there that can support their students. And that's been really exciting to see, because then you know that the student isn't just getting this community-based scholarship, but somebody's reaching out to the university they're going to and saying, hey, can you help this student? And
Beautiful.
I see that becoming more and more a trend in the future.
And that's awesome. And it kind of ensure, well, it doesn't ensure, but it helps that student, get even closer to successfully achieving the goal. When you have accountability and you know that people care and people are checking on you, and so that's awesome. So now parents and students, we know we have those internal, external, college-based scholarships. We have the local community, and the goal is for you to find the ones that are a good fit for you, and shoot your shot for all of them, because we know it's a numbers game. And so, what about the students who are Georgia Tech bound? Like, in their mind, you're on the vision board, they're going there. Do you have any nuggets or words of advice that you can give specifically to those students who will want to apply for the programs that you shared with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for that question. The first thing I would say is, yeah, I'm going to answer it about Georgia Tech. Don't worry, but focus on fit. I literally had a young man at my house last night, friend of my son's, and we asked him where he wants to go to school, and it really did not have a dog in the fight, right?
Right.
And and he of course mentions Georgia Tech, and I think that's great, right? But I wanted, had he not been wanting to go play video games at the time, which is fine,
It's like
it
my
was
son.
Sunday
It's all
night,
good.
right? Had I wanted to say, like, why? Why do you want to go there? And
Right.
what is it about it? And how do you feel, like, have you visited campus? Have you found that you fit there, right?
Hmm.
But once you figure that out, for us or anyone else, then start to target what that school's about. So what does that mean for Georgia Tech? Well, for Georgia Tech, I think what it means is you got to be authentic first and foremost.
Okay.
We know that the students who want to come here are oftentimes going to be technically focused. We know that they're going to have taken the most rigorous courses that are available to them in their situation. And that's, I think, a no-brainer. I think that's something that you have to do. Now, I would also say that we do have some non-technical fields at Georgia Tech, and we pull in some great students into those fields. It's just that they have a technological flavor to them.
Okay. I
So
like that.
we
I
have
like the way you
literature,
put
for
that.
example, yes, media, communication, stuff like that, but there's a technology flavor to it. But most of the time, people are looking at, engineering and things like that.
Okay.
But I think that authenticity is so important because if you imagine, so we received just under 60,000 applications last year, which is a record for us. And I think the students think, oh, I've got to mold myself to this technological portrait. And I already addressed it's important to develop your portrait and then see if it matches.
Right.
And so the example I would use is this. People then go, well, Chafee, what should I put in my application? And should I put on all the technical things that I'm doing? And I go, well, if they're the most important thing to you, yeah, you should.
Right.
But let's say you're a musician, or let's say that you really like art. Like, we don't just want an institution that's full of fully technological people. We want to be a technical institution with technologically qualified people, but who come from a lot of different backgrounds with a lot of different interests. And that authenticity, again, will come through if you put those things down. The really, I know that I've got a lot of people focused on Georgia Tech that are probably going to go, well, give me a concrete answer. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but
But that is.
right? Um, I would tell students almost anywhere to apply early. Apply
Okay.
early to the schools that they want to apply to. One, scholarships are often available only to students who apply early action or
Hmm.
early decision. And I'll mention the difference in just a second because it's a
Perfect.
key difference. And then there's usually a lot more opportunities that are simply sent out to you earlier because you've chosen to apply earlier.
Right.
When you apply later, it's not that big of a deal, but sometimes you do miss out on some
Yeah.
opportunities. In terms of early action versus early decision, this is a really important point. I don't think a lot of students know, and I don't think a lot of parents know. Early action simply means we're going to take action on your application earlier. Whereas
Okay.
early decision means you are making a decision early that you're going to go to this school if you get in.
Right.
So early decisions are binding, whereas early action is generally not binding. It's just
Okay.
letting you know earlier. So what I tell students is be ethical. If you have an early decision school you're really excited about, apply to one of them
Right. Yeah.
ethically, and then apply to a number of other schools early action that you are just about as interested in because you have opportunities of being able to go there, especially if you don't get into that early decision school that you
Right.
may be your dream school.
Beautiful. And then something that you mentioned that has really been a common theme for a lot of the guests that I've had on the show is being authentic. So that concrete thing is yes, the early action, early decision, apply early. That's a very concrete thing. But really, because I'm hearing it over and over again, there must be a lack of authenticity and, like you said, that mold, right? Trying to fit the school versus knowing who I am, knowing my goals, my dreams, and then finding the best college or best scholarship that will meet my needs. So just emphasizing it again, listeners, that authenticity matters. And if you really want your story or your application to shine, even in authentic matter, then be intentional about what you do as a student, from your community service to your leadership, what you do on campus, off campus, as a parent. You can, the younger your scholar is, craft their story. You can help them craft their story so that by the time they are ready to apply, they have a legit story of authenticity that makes a school say, wow, you know, we know you're coming in for tech, but you're also a creative artist and you're doing great things in your community. And so we think you'd be a great fit. Let's partner together. So thank you for saying it again. I've heard it a million times. Authenticity matters. So, Chaffee, my friend, thank you so much. This has been really great, again, to hear it from someone who's on the campus, meeting with the students, meeting with the parents. And so before we close out, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity again to be here. Rocky, I really like what you're doing. I'm excited that so many people are hearing this good information and
Yes.
from lots of different guests. So thank you for that. You know, the last thing I would share is I do get asked a good bit of the time, why do you have these programs? Why, especially when they maybe only serve, you know, for example, our stamps program serves 50 students, and that's out of a class of 4,000 coming in here, or 75 of our Tech Promise students, right? Why do you invest so much in those students? And the program is designed to help them pay forward what they've received, so that their families improve, their communities improve, the areas in their life that they're choosing to major or focus on improve, and in some cases, even the world. And I have seen some of these scholars literally affect their nations and the worlds. And so that's why we have these programs. And I think it's true for those of us who are at lots of different universities, because we want improvement and we want that paying forward. None of us operate these programs because we want students to just get a high salary.
Right. Yeah, it's way beyond that. And I think it goes to that generational lineage, changing the world, that person who's going to create something that creates something. So, you know, students and parents are really grateful for the opportunity, and we hope more students apply, level up their game by getting their leadership, their community service, being authentic in their application. And we thank you again so much, friend, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rocky.
Hey there. I hope you were taking notes and you're ready to implement what you heard. If this podcast inspired you or helped you in any way, I would love for you to subscribe, follow, and share this with a student, parent, or educator you care about, because sharing is caring. Also, your feedback means a lot. So please leave a written review of this show on Apple Podcasts. And if you ever want to connect outside of the podcast, you can find us at The Scholar Budget on Insta or the Book of Faces. So until next time, shine bright and put in the work so we can make those dreams a reality. Bye!